Hey guys, welcome. Muskie Road Rules Podcast, episode number 257. Guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in every week to hear some more muskie gibberish. Tonight's podcast is brought to you by... who we brought to you by? Let's do Lax Reproductions. Is it real or is it lax? Guys, if you're looking for a quality reproduction, you can let the fish go, let it swim away. All you got to do is take some pictures and get some measurements. All you got to do is take the length, the girth, get a couple good pictures there, and Rick Lax at Lax Reproductions is going to make you something that you're going to love hanging on your wall. He can do everything from mounted on driftwood to the plain fish to plaques to even some really, really cool scenes. I've seen some incredible stuff coming out of his studio. So make sure you check that out. Go to Lax, L-A-X, reproductions.com, and you're not going to be disappointed. And guys, also shoot us a text on our Lungin Lures text line, Lungin Lures, LunginLures.com, makers of many fine quality crankbaits, starting with the flagship, the 22 short, but all the way into their spinner series, whether it be the DC9, DC10, the original Lungin tail, or the Nutbuster spinner baits. But you can text us on the Lungin Lures text line at 606-776-6570. Again, 606-776-6570. Guys, thanks for listening tonight. I got two really good guests and me, which is not the best guest. And we have got Cullen Veiders and we got Joe Cooper. Joe's up there on Lake of the Woods. Cullen, you're over there in New York area, aren't you?
Yeah, primarily fish the Niagara River, Lake Erie, and then the St. Lawrence.
Yeah, now, do you know this character out there named Hans Mann?
Oh, I know him well.
He's a dainty little fellow that,
right.
you know, is...
just a little guy.
He's just a little fellow. That's right. I think Hans's fist is bigger than my head.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But he's shrinking. I know he is. He's losing some weight. He's looking good. I've seen some pictures of him. He's starting to look a little healthier, and it's good. I'm happy for the guy.
Yeah, for sure. Good guy.
He's a great guy. So tell me a little bit about what you got going on out there, Cullen. I know you fish, and last year you caught just an absolute stupid one in the late fall. And you guys fish well into the fall, like November, even into December some, right?
Yes, we'll pretty much be fishing till the 15th and fishing at night too. A lot of the water that we're fishing has current. So typically, especially the Niagara River, it really, until it's like February, and it's like, if it's really, really, really cold for like maybe a week, then it'll be to the point where you can't get boats out there. But I mean, typically, there's guys steelhead fishing in February. I've been out there in the lower Niagara doing it in the middle of February. So
do they make enough clothes to do that? That's my only thing. My God, that sounds cold.
Oh yeah, it's freezing for sure. I used to be, before I really got into muskies, I grew up right on Lake Ontario, so I was big into, trout and salmon fishing. And here typically, like where I am located, where I actually live, muskie fishing isn't really like that crazy. It's kind of like the, anomaly of the fishermen or whatever. And then eventually got into that, like even the, Niagara and Buffalo Harbor, maybe in the heyday of the harbor, it was a little different, but now it's just like mostly some local guys that'll go out there and fish. But fortunately we do typically get to fish until the end. There's certain factors, obviously, like get a lot of wind, on Lake Erie, and it'll turn the river to mud a lot. So like there's been years where like maybe there was only 2 fishable days in all of December or at the end of November. But as far as freezing, we're fortunate to be able to get out there still pretty much till the end. But I see, like, that's the thing. I see, on social media, people wrapping up their seasons and, like, we're just getting ready for the super late, late season type stuff. As far as the Niagara River, like, that's where I really started fishing Great Lakes stuff. Typically, you want to, in the late fall, if it's the daytime and you're going to troll, you want that to be that green. If you try and troll the Niagara River in the daytime, when it's clear, typically it's very, very low effectiveness. So if it is clear, we won't even bother trolling unless it's night. But if you get a good south-southwest blow and it gets that, 3 foot of viz-ish in green, then you could hammer them trolling sometimes. But as far as when it's gin clear like that, to me, is the most effective that I've had to catch fish in that is basically dragging a red October tube, not even popping it. That current is so flowing through there so good. You can basically, maybe a slight pull it back and forth, but it basically looks like you're just dead sticking a tube and letting it bang around down there. And we learned that from our one buddy used to fish like that because he used to fish for smallmouth, and we used to do good all year, kind of popping the tubes, giving them a nice little pop. Well, it stopped being as effective the later it got, and those Niagara River fish can be very, very, very lazy. They don't want to move once it's that late. So typically that during the day, that's the most effective method once it gets that cold. And also, if it is colored up, you can do well trolling.
Sure.
The nighttime.
The only time I've ever trolled the Niagara, I was fishing with Captain, and make sure you say Captain, Larry Jones.
Oh, yeah, he put me on my first big one.
Yeah, I was trolling with Captain Larry Jones. It was after dark. I'm out there trolling with this guy. I don't know him that well. And there was another kid with us, and I'm like, we are 4 miles above Niagara Falls. I do not know this fucker. And if that motor quits working, there's 3 morons that are in trouble. And that current out there, that's some serious shit now. That current in the Niagara. Joe, it'd be like on Lake of the Woods. I mean, it's like, imagine your toilet bowl flushing, and that's about the current that you're dealing with on the Niagara, because you're literally right above Niagara Falls where you're trolling.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I think get overlooked by people that aren't familiar with current, especially very late in the year there. A lot of things you hear about muskie trolling, especially in the summer, is speed, speed, speed. I rarely ever, even if it's the dead middle of summer, ever go over 3 miles per hour. And it seems to get the bigger fish. It seems like those, little scrappy ones might do the, 5 mile per hour stuff sometimes, but those bigger fish always seem to come at slower speeds, at least there.
Well, now let me ask you this. Are you trolling into the current?
Yes. Always, sometimes they want it directly into the current, straight up, but typically you want to be going cross current and kind of just sliding across the river while still making ground. Mm-hmm. And you never want to be, I found you can, obviously it's possible you can catch a fish going down current. I've heard it's more, some guys used to do it a lot during the day before there was jigging and stuff like that, and they did all right. But as far as at night, I think I might have caught 1 or 2 fish on the downturn ever. They just seem to like that going up and cross current. And it's cool because in current, you can, especially once it gets late fall, you can kind of start doing some tricks. And some of them I learned on accident. There was a certain run and it was really Humpty Dumpty, ton of humps in there. And it was a hard area to troll. It didn't seem like many people used to ever try to troll it. It was more of a jigging drift. And I still had a pretty primitive fish finder. So you were going by it's coming up, you got to turn. Well, what I learned was if I was coming up to a hump and I saw the graph, the depth coming up, well, I noticed if I popped it in neutral or slowed it down, I could coast behind that hump till I got to the side of it and then go up so I wouldn't bottom my baits up. And I noticed a lot of fish ate like that, especially late. You can almost, if you think about it, you're sliding across that hump and your baits are on that drop off, just dangling in front of those fish's face in the current. Mm-hmm. And it definitely became a pattern. And like, I was told one time, if it starts working over and over, it's, a pattern now. It's not a mistake. So.
Exactly. Unless it's marriages. If it's
marriages,
marriages,
yes, exactly. I'm very familiar with that.
Yeah, if it's marriages, well then, sometimes you're just really bad at decision making.
Me too. Yeah, for sure.
But well, Joe, what's happening up there on Lake of the Woods? You're up in the northwest angle. You said you're still fishing right now, huh?
Still fishing. Pretty much done guiding. I had a couple guys asking about going out, but in my experience, at least once the water goes below 37, it gets pretty tough. I mean, you're fishing for a couple bites a day, and it seems like there's less big ones, and it really changes quick. On I don't even know what day it is today, but
Monday.
The other day we had a great day on Friday. Where we land 5 or 6, and had some others on and lost, had a lot of action, and then the very next day it was just a whole different story. And I know there's weather changes and whatever, but on Friday we were looking at like 37.5, and then it was just starting to dip below 37 by Saturday, and then yesterday and today noticeably different activity. From the bait fish too. All of a sudden the bait fish start chasing your lure around, and
that's cool.
Trying to get after it. Yeah, they're all looking to get down.
Now, what is that, like whitefish?
Whitefish, tullibees, mainly, I'd say. There's in certain areas you're seeing all sorts of different suckers, whitefish, walleyes, tullibee, but the whiteys really start sliding out into the spots just, once you're getting down around 40. So.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I'm not too familiar, so it's cool to hear about that stuff. I don't think I've ever fished a water with tullibee and or whitefish, I don't think.
Man, you really see how many fish are in the lake this time of year. It's kind of crazy. Everything starts sucking into the shorelines and out of the basin, and some areas you're going through looking at the graph, and I think if you took all the fish out, it'd be about 20 feet shallower.
Oh,
no,
wow.
Yeah. So what, Joe? Now, how are you fishing these fish? I mean, there's a variety of ways to do it, but what is your preferred way, and then what all options are there?
Well, it's fun to get a hat trick. You go out in a day, you try and get one jigging, one casting, one trolling. If you can get, your own hat trick besides just the boat, that's really cool. But I prefer casting and jigging right until the end if you can. Jigging has always been one of my favorites. I've really kind of worked on that for a really long time, and in the last 4 or 5 years here really have gotten pretty dialed. But there is times where they just want that bait horizontal, and you get right over top of them, and they'll look, and you slide off and whip something out at them and bring it back across them, and they'll whack it. So it's you just got to recognize, when is the time to quit trying to be vertical, and I kind of feel like jigging versus trolling, that's probably the two most popular tactics on the lake this time of year. And jigging is just getting more popular each year. But it really seems like the average size jigging is better than the average size trolling. I think a lot of days the trollers get better numbers, 6, 7 fish a day, but a lot of them are 38 to 42. And, and with jigging you get, 40, a lot of 45 and up. So it's, maybe a few less bites throughout the day as the trollers get, but it sure is fun, especially when you're, you got the video games and everything that you're going after. Cool. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's, like I said, even before I would take guys out, and even experienced muskie anglers hadn't really heard much about jigging for muskies, and there's sometimes kind of frustrating because you could tell they were like, man, this kid's just burning daylight here.
Yeah.
What are we doing right now? But every now and then I'd get lucky right away, and all of a sudden they're on board, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I definitely like jigging for sure, especially coming from the home of Red October.
Yep. That's, I think it was probably like 2018 or so when I really started realizing how much more effective the Red Octobers were than the other baits I was jigging at the time.
Yeah.
And they're just so many things about the way those baits work that make them the deadliest.
I agree. I would say as far as big fish, like really, really big fish, it's one of my top baits ever, both casting rig and jigging. And you were talking about like all the different, methods you could get the fish now. And like sometimes people will ask me, like, are you more of a troller? Are you more of a caster? And I'm like, I'm whatever is the most effective to catch the biggest fish at that point in time. And I don't care what it is. If it's something I would less rather do, as long as it's the most effective, I'm doing it.
And it's pretty sweet now. The electronics are so good. You can see when it's time to do something else. You don't have to go off of your catches or whatever activity you're having. You can kind of see, they're not where they were yesterday or whatever. So, it's fun to be able to go out and, like I said, the hat trick is always like the goal.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Now, let me ask you this, Joe. The guys up there trolling on Lake of the Woods, and you too, Cullen, I have Joe answer first. When you're trolling up there, are you trying to make bottom contact? Is that a big deal, or are you you're not as much open water, or kind of what are you looking for there?
Well, I'm not trying to make contact necessarily, although when you're going over a point of interest, a lot of times that's going to be the high spot on the tip of a point or something, and it really is a lot of times they're sitting on the back side of a ledge, and your baits come ticking over the rock and off the rock and it right over their heads, and it whacks it. And I think, obviously the baits are kicking to the side after they hit to the rocks and everything. So, I'd say I'm usually looking to a lot of times I'm fishing shallower water, when I'm trolling, and I'm running the baits pretty close to the boat, shallow, trying to keep it, maybe 5 feet over wherever I think the fish should be. And a lot of times that's only like 20 to 30 feet of line out on like a grandma or something like that. Running the bait like 8 feet down. And, I don't troll as much as I used to now that trolling the structure stuff on Lake of the Woods, with a 24-foot center console
is easy.
It's not ideal, man. And I don't have a kicker, so I get going a little too fast, and it takes the whole stretch to slow back down. And luckily, I was able to learn how to troll in aluminum boats, and I haven't ran this one up on top of anything unexpectedly while I was trolling yet. But
you haven't hit an island with it?
I hit islands when we're jigging, and I haven't looked away from the graph for 3 hours. I'll back into it.
That's always my excuse when I hit islands. Is mine is just I'm texting, and that's why I hit islands or land masses that I started to call them.
I'm like, somebody hit pause. I gotta look up for a second here.
Exactly. So, Cullen, what about you in that current? Are you trying to hit bottom or stay just above it?
I will say that sometimes I've, watched a rod. We run a lot of deeper baits, a lot of real fast diving baits, like my typical straight bait. I caught that big fish on that dives very deep, very fast. So like, I've definitely watched it smacking, a shoal or something, and all of a sudden it starts wiggling again right before it gets bit. Ideally, though, typically if I'm fishing the Niagara, I'd put one where the fish might have to move maybe 5 feet, and then one right on the bottom. The St. Lawrence, if I'm marking the fish and they're deep, I kind of try to put it within a foot of them. I've noticed, the later it gets, the less apt to, for those fish to just jet up, in the summertime or early fall, those fish, sometimes will shoot up, 15 feet. We had a fish on the St. Lawrence casting, in August, I believe, or September. And it's funny because, using the live scope or whatever, you would never know this if you didn't have it, but you'd think they were just coming off the weed line. Well, we were watching fish come up on 13s, but they were coming right from below the boat, and we got a fish to engage 3 times in 24 feet of water, and it would shoot up from the bottom to check the blades out. And that's just stuff you wouldn't be able to know unless you had something like live scope.
Well, the other thing, too, is, and people may not realize this, but you can explain it to them, Cullen, is the St. Lawrence is friggin' clear.
Oh, yeah,
it's ridiculous.
I've had, where I caught that big one, I've had nights where if it's a full moon, I could see bottom in 30 feet of water. And
yeah.
I definitely, so I noticed, I fished other waters that were pretty clear and got them real short. But that place definitely has a reputation for having to have those, I don't go that far back, but I've heard of guys putting baits back 200 and 400 feet before.
Jeez.
What?
I don't have that much line on my reel.
Yeah, typically, even super deep baits, it's not crazy to have a back 60 feet.
Holy.
Yeah. And I feel like, there's just on certain waters I've fished, there's a lot of non-adaptation to the temperature change. What worked in September probably won't work as good. What was great in September probably won't work as good as if you're fishing, into December. You can't just keep your bait, run the same program all the time and just expect it to always be the most effective thing. You have to adapt to the situation and what the fish are doing, and I see a lot of that.
Yeah, that's the thing. The St. Lawrence, the few times I fished it, it was just oh my God, this is clear, and those fish that'll shoot up out of it is amazing, like you said, with live scope. And Joe, I'm sure you can attest to this too. How far up these fish will come sometimes.
It's unbelievable.
And on just regular baits. I'm not talking about, the big debate right now is the, going out sharpshooting and targeting the fish. This is just regular fishing. This is just casting baits, and those fish are just coming up, sometimes in that clear water from a long, long distance. And it is pretty amazing to watch them do that. Now, Cullen, you tell us about the fish you got last year. You got a giant last year, and was that in December?
That was in late October. It kind of went against all the typical, stuff you'd look for on a gigantic musky day. It was ultra warm, actually, considering the date. Flat calm. And there had been some nasty weather a few days before, and we had some buddies that were already up there or headed up, and they're hammering fish. They got some good fish. I know our one buddy got a 55 right off the bat.
Well, that's not bad.
So I'm God, they're just it was a crazy front coming through. It just seemed those fish chowed. And by the time we got there, and I was fishing with a guy, John Miller, he's part of the Niagara Muskie Association club. Good guy, been friends with him for years. And we ended up going up, and he wanted to try and fish that area where I got that fish. But first 2 days, it was pretty bad weather, for the boat we were in. to fish that area. It's much bigger, wider water up that way. So we went east, and when we were launching the boat, I remember my buddy texted me that he just got, however, like a 47-incher. Well, then for like days and days, like it was like we got there when those fish were just shutting off. And like we knew it on the way up. We're like, this is the worst timing ever. And the same guys that were hammering those fish didn't get another bite, I don't think, for like at least 4 days. And so we fished, doing casting and jigging for 2 days. And then, the area where I caught that fish, it's not like a place you're going to like by any means catch numbers. It's like when people ask me about it, I compare it like, do you want to play scratch offs or do you want to play the Mega Millions? And obviously the odds are a lot better on a scratch off.
Yeah.
But so I said, we got to try, man. Like, and I had been there like 2 weeks prior. I actually had one of my best nights ever on that water, considering it usually isn't like that. We had like 6 hookups. And so I knew like relatively the areas they were already in and the depths they were already in. And I figured they'd move out a little deeper. And we went there, we're trolling around, and typically what I'm, looking for is you'll see big pods of bait with the arcs in them. And it's crazy because even when they're loaded in there, like, and you got they want to eat on, sometimes it's just so much water to get right over those fish's heads. It's, there's sometimes where they're there, but like they just will not eat. So every time, we'd pass over a fish, I'd waypoint it. And basically the waypoints just start, forming your line, that you're going to follow until they just finally eat. Because with fall fishing, I've noticed like you could be on the fish all day and they're there. But, even in the summer, that's just how muskies are. So I would just mark the fish and I'm just like, they're here, I'm just going to keep working them. And there was like a more popular area on that spot that a bunch of boats were on. And I'm like, this is just crazy. Like, it seems like bumper boats in there, probably not for like anybody that's fished Minnesota or anything, but for us out there, it felt like a lot of people. So I was like, I'm going up this way and went more towards the lake. Because I'm just like, I know there was fish up here recently, and that way I'm out of the boats. And it probably about 5 p.m. The fish finder on that boat, we didn't have live scope, we didn't have any of that stuff. It was just your basic like average fish finder where you can, mark marks, get your depth, get your map. And we marked this mark, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, dude, here's a huge one. And I'm like, I looked at him, and I said, that might not even be a muskie, man. Like, that might be a sturgeon. Like, that thing just looks ridiculous on there. So I waypointed anyway. That was probably at 5:30 p.m. Keep working the other marks we marked. Nothing's going. 2 other boats we knew with guys out on the water. No bites, fish through a minor or whatever, or a major. And nobody gets anything. So we're like, what the hell? Because we know they're there. Come back up probably about 9 o'clock. And I mark another one right there. But I realized that's not another fish. That's the exact same one once I went to hit, mark on the graph. And so basically just kept working that and figured, we'll fish through this. There was another moon phase from like 12 to 2 or something like that, and we had not caught a fish. Like, this was day 3, no bites. And my year last year compared to prior years was probably the worst year I had had in 10 years. And so I was kind of pretty down on myself. Definitely tougher than my prior years. And we're like, whatever, we'll fish through this last moon phase and then just call it, go back to the hotel, get some sleep, and get out of there. And it was probably 12:30 at night. I was coming through that same spot, and the rod goes off. And then, like, when you haven't, how it is, when you haven't heard that sound in like multiple trips out fishing, you're almost like confused for a second.
I'm getting up swinging.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that Office. Okay, everybody remain calm. It's happening. And so I go back there. I grab the rod. The rod did not go how I would picture a fish like that to pull. Typically I think like a kind of slower, dragged out pull with some big head shakes, or just scream right off the bat. And it just kind of went off like if it was like a 4-footer or something, 8. So I grabbed the rod. It was on a wire rod, so it is a little different.
Wire. Thank you.
Yeah. So it was
wire.
Definitely a little different feeling when you're fighting them on that. It's a little harder to gauge sometimes. And I'm fighting it. I'm like, I know it's not a 30-incher, but like, I don't think I have something ridiculous on. So I'm fighting it. It's coming in just like if it was like your, normal adult fish. And then all of a sudden it like stopped. And I have never, ever, ever experienced this. I've had fish where I hooked casting and it felt like you were in a snag for a second, real big ones. But never have I had this happen trolling. I'm fighting the thing and then it just stops and it's not head shaking. It's not swimming to the side. It just like sat there with the bait crunched in its mouth or something. And it would have looked like I was just snagged on a rock or something. It was so awkward to the point where I'm like, what is even going on right now? Like, did something weird down there happen? Did I get hooked on something? And I'm like, dude, you gotta slow that motor down. And he's like, it's as slow as it's going to go. And I was like, well, you got to cut the motor then because I can't move this thing. And as soon as he cut the motor, it just stripped off a bunch of wire. And that's when I started, I was like, dude, this might be a really big fish. So fight it in. It gets into the headlamp and Johnny Miller's just like, that's her, dude. That's the one. Like, and I'm at this point, typically, I've caught, 55s, 57s and I get them to the net and I know, back up, steer its head in, work with the net guy, gotten pretty good at that. This one, I looked like a person that was on a salmon charter that has never caught a salmon before. My legs were shaking so bad once I saw how big it was. And I basically just kept reeling. It looked like I had never musky fished probably because I was just in such shock when I saw the thing. And I remember it started getting hard to stand because my adrenaline was pumping so hard. And all I could think was, I might not land this fish or I'm going to screw this up because I can't even keep it together. So it gets to the boat and Johnny was on my right side. I was at the back of the boat. It started to dive towards the kicker motor and he started reaching for it in front of me from the total other side of me. And I'm just thinking no, man, don't do that. And this guy is built like a tank. His forearms got to have, a crazy circumference on him.
I think I've met him actually.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah.
Yep. And he reaches for this thing and I'm just in my head thinking no, wait for a better shot. Next thing I know, he's already got it in there. He was just so strong and just so built like that he was able to still keep that leverage with his hands at the end of the net. And he said he knew he could get it and he wasn't letting it get in that kicker motor. And so we get it in the net and I'm just looking at it. And at that time, that was my 10th fish over 55 and my previous personal best was 57.5 jigging at that point. And I'm looking at the thing in the net and I'm just how is this possible? The difference between seeing a 50 and then seeing a 53, just how it's a different being typically.
Oh yeah.
It was like that, but on just the craziest level I've ever seen. I'm how is this thing substantially bigger than anything I have ever caught? And I'm looking at it and I'm just trying to I'm how big is this thing? Is it just a huge gigantic 57? So we pull it out of the bag. We put it on the bump board. It was a 61-inch bump board that he had. And I lay it down and he just starts losing. He's like, are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? And I look and it's 59.5. So now I'm losing it. And Yeah, so I'm like, the head on the thing was like just absolutely crazy. And so anyways, we tried getting some pictures. Well, my phone's all like my hands are all slimy. He can't get his phone to work. And I'm like, dude, like, no, I cannot not get good pictures of this thing. So he's like, we got to get her back in the net. He's like, we got to get her back in the net. So we put her back in the net, get her upright. And I'm like, I'm trying to, my main fishing partner, who I always fish with, my favorite person to fish with for sure is John Pencil. Kind of like, you know, some people might know him. He's not really out there like mainstream or anything, or he stays to himself typically. But that's my main fishing partner for sure, and has been for a long time. And he was out on the water, you know, with another guy, and then our other buddy was out there with another guy. So there was 2 other boats out there. Well, I try calling him. First, he doesn't answer. Try calling him again. He picks up, and I'm like, dude, I got a 59.5 incher. Like, you got to get over here. The phones aren't working. So they you hear him tell the dude, he's like, pull all those rods. And they were over there like very, very quick. And they pull up, and I'm just like, wait till you see this thing. I'm like, it's got to be 55 pounds. And they were on the other side of the boat. When I pulled it out of the net, I actually have video of like the reactions, and they're just like, what the fuck is that thing? And so got really good pictures, got a bunch of video of weighing it, bunch of release stuff. And I'm like, we gotta weigh this thing. And, you know, that's what we're out there on that water trying to do, is like record hunt. So we had 2 certified chatillon scales with us. And how, you know, you typically do it, just to not, obviously you don't want to hang the fish vertically. Mm-hmm. So you take the handle out of the net, get as low as you can on it, and get the hook in there. And it was super, super hard to like even hold. So Big Johnny Miller had to like grab onto it. And I think our other buddy, and we had to hold it out over the back deck or whatever. Pencil starts reading the scale, and his voice starts cracking. I swear to God, I thought he was going to cry. And goes, dude, it's reading 62 pounds. He's like, it's a 58-pound fish. And then we weighed the net hoop on our, like a digital bass scale, and it was like 3 and change, so it was slightly over 58 pounds. And then we ended up getting her back in, and she lived another day. But it was definitely, and to do it on my favorite nighttime bait that I made was like a dream come true. Because if anybody knows me, knows that like my passion for bait building, and you know,
that whole story is a dream come true. I mean, wow.
Yeah, and it was basically like I always thought it would happen too. Like that bait on wire, like I just had it in my head that like a giant was going to eat that. And I remember people would tell me I was crazy for just like being out on that water, and I could just be on this water still catching, you know, really, really nice fish. And I remember I'd always tell them, at one point that rod is going to go off, and it's going to be one of those absolutely crazy fish you've seen out of that place. And it finally happened, and it was definitely, for me, the greatest night of my life.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, and what's cool is you got that fish on a bait that you made. Now, for guys that don't know, you make musky candy baits, right?
Yep.
And so what was that bait that you caught that fish on?
So it was the deep straight sniper. It's basically 10 inches with the lip, 8-inch body. And I think typically you would run slightly bigger stuff on that water, but I don't think those fish were super hungry yet. And I think part of the reason that fish weighed as much as it did is it had a ton of food in it. And so I think it was kind of more like a little snack to start eating again. Like I almost feel like if you pulled a big plow or something in front of it, or a giant 13-inch believer, like it just wasn't that hungry yet. Mm-hmm. And it was in the night stalker pattern, which has basically just been like an absolute my go-to. I mean, it's caught giant fish during the day too, but I made this bait, this color for night, and we used to do really good before I started making baits. on that shiner colored holograph Ernie.
Yep.
So I basically took that and like kind of souped it up and made a little more contrast to it. And then I've done really well on both the pink belly stripe and the orange belly stripe. But that thing for me has just been like the go-to. Like I just never feel like I'm at a disadvantage if that thing's down. Like I feel like I got a really, really good chance at a big fish.
Sure. How deep of water did that fish come out of?
That was 26 and dropping off.
Okay. So it was right on an edge there.
Yeah.
Where
I remember watching the graph right before it ate, like watching, the drop off like a cliff.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty awesome. Catch one of the biggest fish that, has probably ever been caught. That's a pretty crazy story. Joe, tell us about your 59 and a half.
Yeah, it was a lake sturgeon.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, it was on 3 night crawlers and a circle hook.
I hooked it right in the asshole.
Yes.
They fight right like that, though.
Oh yeah, they don't come off either.
No, they don't. That's for sure.
They're too embarrassed.
Hey Joe, let's talk here real quick before we go on. You're out there casting, jigging in this super cold stuff. Anything you do to your equipment or stuff like that to make it last a little longer in this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I just I have actually a jet boil in the boat that I bring with to make like some ramen or whatever.
Nice.
And when things get really locked up on the reels, I'll just dip some lake water, warm it up quick, and just dump it on there. But if you got the old school Trinidad, you could cast until it's below zero. So it's
Wow.
It's not easy. You gotta. I like to have a big bag of those nitrile, like oil change gloves, and just keeping your hands dry throughout the day. Even when your gloves are wet, you have those things on underneath, and that helps a lot. But
Yeah, it's gotta be freezing up there. Holy crap.
Yeah, well, we kind of had a really cold stretch there, about a week where the highs were like in the 20s, and
That's hardcore for sure.
it was actually great fishing at that time. But yeah, it's not easy. Especially with no windshield. I know a tiller is one thing, but a center console, you're like standing up in the wind all day.
Oh no, yeah.
And so it's harsh, but luckily this time of year we don't have to put many miles on to get to where I like to fish, and it just takes some trial and error to find out what you need to be able to get it done. And some days you got to call it a little earlier than you want to, but
For sure.
keep being able to bring my boat into a heated shop at night really helps. The guy I work for in the winter has a huge shop and lets me stick it in there. And without that, I'd be breaking a lot more, even more expensive things than the stuff I'm already breaking. So,
no, that makes a big deal there. Cullen, what about you as far as like trolling and stuff? I mean, you're out there at night. It can be super cold. Is there anything you could tell people that will help them as far as rod holders freezing up and all that shit?
Typically, as long as everything is dry, we typically don't have too many problems. I notice it's more with casting, but like at that time of year, we kind of stay slightly away from casting, but I know it can be horrible because I have casted in some cold stuff, and I feel like that's when you get the most troubles when you're casting. Like if we're jigging, typically you're only having so much line out, and then it basically is always just, if you're jigging even 20 feet, what are you going to have out? Like 40 feet of line, maybe.
Sure.
So you're kind of fortunate in that, as long as you keep the, ice out of the guides and don't let it build up too bad. One thing I will say is weir is super nice because it doesn't hold any water.
What did you say?
wire is really nice
Yes.
for that because it doesn't hold any water.
Mm-hmm. No, wireline is. I've ran wire for 10 years, and I always have. In Kentucky, one of the great things about Kentucky is our lack of law, and you can run as many rods as you want. And I run 6 rods at all times, and 2 of them are wire. And I'm everywhere I've been, I've always said the biggest fish eat wire. They always do. And it may not get the most fish, but if there's a big one there, she'll find that wire rod.
It seems pretty accurate if I think about it for myself.
Oh, it is with everybody. It's just that wire, boy, when it's talking to them down there, it gets them going. And
that's what I've been doing wrong. I've never even used wire.
Oh my God, Joe. This winter,
just like
I'll be up there
like
and I will show
10
you.
10 gauge 2-wire? Or?
It's I run 40-pound Monel.
I'm just going to go pull the stuff out of the shed. I don't use those lights anyways.
Yeah. I mean, just use the copper stuff. It's whatever's in your Christmas lights. Just strip them.
Oh, yeah.
And use that. But no, just 40 pound. I run 40-pound Monel. I have ran the 50-pound, but I don't see much difference myself.
Yeah, I like the 40 too.
Yep, and and I don't run. Now, you probably run more than I do because I do a lot of short line stuff. So, the 300-foot spool, I'll only run like 150 feet on my wire rods because I'm not letting that much line out,
Yeah, typically I'll put on the whole 300
Yep.
because there has been times, not that many occasions, but there's been times where I had, deep baits back 100 on the wire.
Sure. No, I get it. And I think if I was in a situation like you, I'd be doing the same thing.
Go
ahead.
Oh, you go.
I got nothing to say.
I was going to say too, and what I noticed with wire, especially if you were to fish something with like real steep structure that drops off quick, I noticed that it seems to track more rapidly around like the turns versus like, if you cut the end of a shoal with braid on a, shallower diving bait, it's going to clip that shoal like coming over it. I feel like if fish are sitting on sides of deep structure with wire, if you have a deep bait down on it, you can almost like perfectly track it along it.
Yeah, wire will follow you exactly. And it's super super cool stuff. I've caught so many fish on wire over the years, and I've always, no matter what, if I'm only allowed 2 rods, if I'm only allowed, or if I've got multiple people in the boat, I'm allowed 1 rod, at least one is going to be wire out there. Because it will eventually definitely get you the big one. I know that for sure. But, well, guys, we had a good talk tonight. I'm glad we were able to get both of you on here. Cullen, what do you, anything you want to promote? I'm sure the baits.
If anybody wants to ever check out my baits or whatever, typically it's just, I'm pretty old school, man. I used to try and keep like a website going, but it seemed like usually I'd just put the stuff up and somebody would already ask if it was available. So basically, at times I'll have handfuls of baits that, are extras and I'll put them up somewhere. But typically if you want baits from me, it could be my personal page. I really don't care. Like I said, I consider everybody in the muskie world like a friend. So, some guys will just message me on my personal Facebook. And then I also have the business page, Muskie Candies Customs. And then there's the Instagram page too. Basically, I'll make paint whatever color you want, even if it's something crazy. Obviously I have some staples in there that a lot of people will order. But if somebody wants something custom, I've had a lot of custom orders where they wanted it very specific. And like I said, that's my full-time job. So like, I'm not turning anybody down. Like, I'll paint whatever the hell you want. So,
if you want it, I'll paint it.
Pretty much. So, but yeah, the best way is just do that. you know, a lot of guys, I'm big on lists because doing it that way can get you scatterbrained. So typically I'll have them, you know, I'll ask them to write out a list so then I can at least screenshot it and write it down. But like I said, I'm a pretty old school guy with that stuff.
Cool. Well, that's a good deal. Joe, you got anything you want to promote?
Just no, I guess not really. No.
Well, what's your
Somebody might be
website?
pissed off at me. Just myself, Joe Cooper.
He's a great guy. It's a good person.
Coolest dude I know. He's pretty cool.
What? All right. So your website, you know, for next year, you're going to be booking and stuff like that. And then what about your ice stuff you got coming up? You got any ice things coming up?
Yeah. So, well, obviously, I work right out of the angle with Red Fox Ice Fishing. I also take guys out onto the Ontario side using snowmobile. Pretty busy. This is shaping up to be the busiest winter I've ever probably had. I also work for Frostbite Fishing. If I get lucky, I can throw out a video for them every now and then. I help them with some of their development on some of their stuff or whatever, a little bit, not really, but they help me out big time. They're awesome. I should give them a shout out. I was supposed to be on an ice fishing trip in northern Manitoba with them this week, and I wasn't able to make it. But other than that, we need ice. Where it's going to happen. I know that, but seems like a lot of recent years we get a cold snap and there's just enough to get out there, and then it kind of warms up for a while, and you're not really gaining any thickness, but hopefully we can start freezing up here, and I mean, I guess hopefully, yep.
Next week, I think you're going to see it next week because I'm going to be in the angle and I'm going to bring all the blows of hell with me, and so
the whole inlet was frozen.
Oh, yeah.
And then I turned to come down the French Portage last weekend, and I suppose they put the planks across the cribs, and there was ice all the way to the north end. I had to double back and go all the way back around down Tranquil, so it was a bummer. But the lake is freezing.
Yeah, she's gonna do it. It's gonna get cold. That's part of it. But but well, thanks for coming on.
They just changed.
Oh yeah. Well, thanks for coming on here, guys. For anyone, we got some new Muskie Hunter stuff coming up. We're going to have some new clothing and stuff out here very soon, calendars and all that ready for Black Friday. And yeah, everything's going well. So, guys, we will talk to you later. And, Cullen, good luck. I know you'll be fishing. Joe, don't fall in.
Sure.
And I'm done on Saturday, and I'll be up at the angle. You'll notice when there's a dark cloud that just forms. I pulled in, but you guys take care, okay?
Yeah, thanks very much for having us, man.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.